Welcome. That's the official welcome to the this episode of the Gather In podcast, YouTube video, Facebook video, whatever you happen to be tuning in with. And we've never done a three-way conversation before like this, so you can't see that I've got my tie and my name tag on there.
Show off.
Which is terrible. So I'm showing off a little bit because, yes, this is my second full-time mission as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My two guests on the left of my screen, could be the right of your screen, is Van Crispman. Van, wave, so everyone can tell which one you are. That's Van. And on the other side is Joe Hatch. Joe, welcome to you both. Now,
Thank you.
Everyone, great to have you. Everyone's going to have a little bit of well, we're going to go back in time a little bit today, and I'm firstly going to do a sort of brief introduction as to how I know you two people. So for those of you who have been listening to my podcast a little while and seeing some of my posts, you may have gleaned the fact that I'm a convert to the church, and I have been a member of the church for 42 years, come this November the 11th, I think it was, when I was actually baptised by the tireless one, by Joe Hatch.
That'd be me.
Yeah, that'd be you. So I did try to get hold of Rodney Jones for this episode of the podcast too, because it was mainly Rodney Jones from Idaho, from Preston, Idaho, and Joe Hatch, who at that time was from...
Snowflake. Taylor.
Oh,
Arizona.
Taylor, Arizona. That's right.
Snowflake.
Taylor, Arizona.
Big difference there.
Yeah.
So it was Joe and Rod who taught me, mostly, apart from the first discussion,
Correct.
which was Van and Joe. So I don't know what date it was, and maybe one of you two gentlemen have it written in your journals. I don't know what day of the week it was. It must have been in October that you two knocked on my door. I was a 24-year-old. What can we say?
Ski bum.
I was a 20
surf bum.
Surf bomb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ski bum, surf bum. I was a 24-year-old, going nowhere really, except for having a bit of fun in life. And you could say I was lacking direction, perhaps. That would be a nice way of putting it. But I'd gone through a period of time in my life, and we'll get to that perhaps a little bit later because I want to talk about you two first. I'd gone through a period of time in my life where I was unknowingly being prepared for Joe and Van to knock on my door. And so what I wanted to cover a little bit today, because at the time you were both 19, 20-year-olds, something like that.
Van,
I was 21.
Home. Yeah,
I was just
21.
2 weeks from going home about when we knocked on your door.
Yeah. So Van, you were maybe 21?
21. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And Joe was a very fresh 19-year-old.
I would have been 19, yep.
Yeah. And you'd both come from backgrounds which were vastly different to my background. So for those of you who don't know, I grew up in the town of Geelong, or Geelong, as the Americans would say, which is not far from Melbourne in Victoria, in Australia. So,
Van, I think he's mocking us.
He is mocking us.
well, no. I mean, if you look how it's written, it is Geelong and Melbourne, I mean, you guys are right. Colleen Lowe's just made a comment there. Incredible how technology makes it so easy to keep in touch. Yeah, so there's a little bit of an interesting story there too, because over the 40 years or so, 42 years, Joe and I have kept in touch for most of that time via snail mail and the occasional phone call. There was a brief period of time where we lost contact, but from the time that Van and Joe knocked on my door in November of 1981. I didn't talk to Van until, when was it, Van? Maybe a year, maybe 2 years ago, perhaps?
I think it was about a year ago. I contacted Joe first to try to figure out how to get a hold of you.
Yeah. It was actually before my wife and I started our mission, which was in March last year. So it was prior to that.
Oh, yeah, it was prior.
So, yes. So there was roughly a 40-year hiatus in our communication. I think I may have written you a letter once.
I do remember getting one letter. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I got a response.
No, I don't know. Yeah. Probably not.
You were
wouldn't have
You were
gotten
busy
one
with
from
stuff.
me either. So, yeah. Righty.
So,
Too much effort.
like Colin said, our modern technology has made it so much easier to keep in touch. So look, I think we might start with Van. Van, you knocked on my door with Joe, as you said, right at the end of your mission in the last 2 weeks. You'd spent 2 years in the Australian Melbourne mission with President Sanders as your mission president?
President Sanders was my second mission president. But yeah, I'd been out about 8 months when President Sanders started.
Okay. Whereas, Joe, you had your whole mission with President Sanders, correct?
Correct, yeah. I'd been out for 3 months, I think, when I was transferred with Van to Geelong. Yep.
Okay, so you weren't didn't have your initial training in Geelong. You were trained elsewhere.
In Kensington.
Kensington. Oh, beautiful Kensington.
With Rob Pollard. Van might remember Rob.
Pollard, I do remember Rob. Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I'd never heard of him, Joe. You'd never mentioned him to me before. Anyway, then you'd been on your mission for nearly 2 years by that point. Just two weeks shy of 2 years.
Yeah.
How had your mission gone up until that point of time? Tell us about, coming into the mission field, what your expectations were. Look, yeah, prior to that, let's talk about why. You were a 19-year-old young man. You'd grown up in Idaho?
In Idaho. Uh-huh.
You'd grown up in Idaho, and for some reason, you decided you somehow ended up in Australia.
I did, yes, yeah. So I grew up a member of the church. I had 2 older brothers and an older sister who all served missions, and felt like that was the thing that I should do. And when I got my mission call to Australia, I wasn't quite sure even where that was. I had to get a map out and figure out where Melbourne was. Of course, I didn't say up Melbourne when I first looked it up and read it on my mission paper, mission call. But yeah, little tiny town in Idaho, about 3,000 people that I grew up in. I grew up on a farm and felt that I should serve a mission. So I put in my mission papers, not having any clue where I would end up in the world.
Okay. Can I ask, Van, through your growing up years, your family, I'm guessing, attended church regularly?
Yes.
In the home, did you have what we call a normal sort of LDS practice in the home of family prayer and scripture reading together and family home evening, all that sort of stuff?
We did. My father was actually a bishop when I was a teenager. And so had a good, strong background in the church and was able to, we read the scriptures together, we prayed together, we went to church every week. So very much immersed in the gospel.
Okay, in the gospel and in the culture.
And in the culture, yes, very much so.
Okay, so did you feel there was some sort of cultural expectation that you would serve a mission? You mentioned your older brothers and sisters serve missions, and you just thought that was sort of the thing to do. Was there a time at all through your teenage years where you sort of maybe thought about, well, why do we do this? What's the point of all this? Was there any of that teenage rebellion happening in your life at all?
Interesting. For me, there wasn't. For me, I never. Maybe I was young enough. I was number 6 of 8 in our family, and for me, there was no question that I would serve a mission. It was culture. There was an expectation to serve a mission, but I never questioned that. That was not. I never had the teenage rebellion years. I just stayed pretty strong. I've stayed pretty strong my whole life.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. We've just got a hi from Nikki Ann Davis. Do either of you know Nikki Ann Davis? Welcome, Nikki Ann, wherever you are and whoever you are. It's
I did
good to have you on.
I did see that my son was watching a little. Came across a little bit ago. So.
Oh, good. So there was that expectation. You get a letter in the mail from the first presidency of the church saying you've been called on a mission to the Australia-Melbourne mission. You didn't know where Australia was. You didn't know where Melbourne was. You didn't know anything.
Right. No, I didn't know anything.
I'm guessing you did maybe 3 or 4 years of seminary training.
I did. I had 4 years of seminary.
Okay, now for our non-Latter-day Saint friends, seminary in our culture is a class that our high school teenagers go to 4 or 5 days a week. It varies a little bit from location to location. It's not like the seminary that a Catholic priest would go to for formal training to the ministry. It's a high school class.
It's a high school class.
And people graduate from seminary with a varying range of little to no knowledge, ranging up to quite good knowledge of the gospel. It can vary quite a bit, and it probably depends on the home life and other aspects. But there's it's not formal training for the ministry, as we shall say. So you landed in the mission field. Did anything in your first? Do you remember back how much you were in shock at what you were trying to do, or what were your initial impressions of landing in the mission field?
There was quite a bit of shock when I first landed. My trainer took me to a milk bar. We got a pie and a pasty. I had no clue what a pie and a pasty was when we went in to get something to eat. And then we went to our flat. It was behind a home, and the man who was letting it to us, he loved to tease the missionaries. And so he came back to visit with his every slang, Aussie slang that he could find to throw at me. And I had not a clue what he was saying. And I thought I'd gone to someplace that didn't speak English at all. And so it was a little bit of a shock those first few days.
Absolutely. I'm sure it would have been. What we might do now is just switch over to Joe for a little while. Joe, your background is, I think, fairly similar to Van's, except you were several hundred miles to the south in Arizona in a slightly warmer climate.
Yeah, mine was, listening to Van, his life at home was a lot like mine, except when I got my mission call, I was away at school, and I was participating on a college track team. And the day I got my call, I remember I had I knew my papers were in, and we were expecting it to come. And I was pole vaulter, and I was out there getting ready to run down the runway and vault and at practice. And I looked over the side of the track, and there my parents were. And I just went, that's odd. Wonder why they're here, And then I went, oh, my call must have come. So I opened my call right up there in the stands with my parents there. I was really kind of hoping to go. I was hoping to go foreign. I was hoping to have a language. And so when it said AUSTR, I thought maybe Austria, maybe German or something like that. But Australia, it said Australia, and I was ecstatic. It was kind of neat to open my call there with the guys that on the track team that I was vaulting with. One of them was a good friend of mine and had been around for a long time. We went to high school together. He ended up going to Thailand. Him and I went in the MTC at the same time, actually. And his call came probably around the same time. But anyway, yeah, it was kind of a neat experience. And my childhood experience was very similar to Van's, except I remember thinking about my mission and going, okay, I don't know what I'm going to run into, but I can do anything for 2 years. Whatever, I can do anything. Even if it's miserable, I can suffer for 2 years. So I do remember making that decision that, no matter what it is, I can do it for 2 years. So anyway.
Yeah, fantastic. And just to ask you the same question that I asked Van, through your growing up years, did you have any sort of teenage rebellion happening there, or any questions about what you were doing in life and why your family went to church every Sunday and did all these other funny things? And
no, not really. And I there is a story that I might tell you sometime about. I remember when I knew the church was true and it was the way that I wanted to live. And that happened when I was 10 years old. And from that time on, I knew I would go on a mission. I didn't, of course, like I said, I didn't know what it would bring, but I knew I would. And I had determined to live my life the way the Savior had asked us to live. So I was very fortunate to have that happen so young.
yeah, absolutely. And I know you're one of the younger ones in your family. Are you the youngest?
The youngest of 6. Yep.
And so your older siblings, were they returned missionaries? Had they already served missions?
Yeah, both my brothers served missions, one in Columbus, Ohio, and the other one in Rochester, New York.
That's the same. Okay. That's the same as my 2 older brothers.
Really?
One in Rochester and one in Columbus.
Wow. How did we not know that?
No, I don't know. That's amazing.
That is amazing. Wow.
You may have known that, and 40 years of memory losses wiped that out. So, look, that's really interesting. So you gained a testimony of the restored gospel early.
Very early.
But did you still feel, when it came roughly time for you to be serving as a missionary, was there the same sort of societal pressure, expectations?
Yeah, definitely. There was definitely a cultural pressure there, because I remember feeling that for some friends who decided not to go. Right, you always feel that anxiety for them of what's their life going to be like, and you really want them to go, and I knew that people wanted me to go too. I mean, especially in a small town, and Ben can probably relate to that. If you don't go on a mission in a small Mormon community, oops, I said the M word, LDS community, everybody knows. I mean, everybody knows. And then the question is, I wonder why he didn't go. So yeah, there was a lot of pressure that way, but in my case, that wasn't my motivator for going. So, yep.
Yeah. So, just for those who have just joined, and I can see my friend Kyle Jacobs has just joined. These 2 young men that I'm interviewing, and I say young because they're both 5 years younger than me or so.
Yeah. I'm the youngest.
You are.
Just want to point that out.
you wanted to point out that which was not obvious.
Yeah.
Is that the thing?
Exactly.
So these are the two young missionaries who late October, early November in 1981 knocked on my door. And so usually on my podcast, the usual thing that I do is try to find people who have become members of the church, who are converts to the church, who can tell a conversion story. So the tables are turned a little bit today, where I have these two young men who knocked on my door talking to me. I'm the convert today. These two men are the missionaries. So we're going back 42 years. I haven't spoken to Van much at all in those 42 years, but I've kept in touch with Joe frequently. Van was somewhat flying below the radar there up in Idaho, getting on with his academic career and family and all that sort of thing. And Joe was becoming an electrical engineer. Is that correct, Joe?
That is what I do right now, yeah.
That is correct. And raising a family there. So what I do want to talk about now, we'll switch back to Van for a little while. Van, you'd served your mission for nearly 2 years by the time you knocked on my door. Historically, and it's probably still the same, Melbourne, Australia mission is not a high baptising mission, shall we say. You could serve in the Melbourne mission and barely get to teach anyone. How was your 2 years prior to knocking on my door, Van?
Well, I had the privilege over the 2 years of seeing 15 people baptized.
Wow.
So that was actually pretty good. But I've been out.
That's incredible.
I've been out about 5 months before I was able to see the first individual baptized. But it's interesting. It was still hard. There were a lot of people, and Joe probably found this as well. A lot of people who very friendly, loved to talk to you as long as you didn't talk about religion or politics. They very, very kind people that would visit with you, but it was hard, but it was good.
Right. And the time that you knocked on my door in Geelong, how long had you and Joe been serving there together?
I think it had only been a few weeks, hadn't it, Joe, as I recall?
Yeah, I think just a few weeks, yeah.
Yeah. And
look, one thing to point out, so Geelong had been closed for a while, right, Van?
I think you're right.
They sent 2 sets of missionaries, and Geelong had been closed for, I don't know, a couple of years, I think.
Yeah, so we went down and we had one from Tonga, didn't we?
Tonga, yeah.
Yeah. Missionary that was there with us, Elder Fine.
And then one from Ecuador, was it Ecuador?
I can't remember the other one right now. I'll have to, Elder Solis, yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah, I remember Rob Solis, yeah. He was also, I think he lived in Sydney, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been in Geelong a little while, and Geelong historically is probably one of the lower baptising areas of the Melbourne Mission. Back then, Geelong was part of the Fairfield West Stake of the church, and there was one ward in Geelong. Today, Geelong is part of the Wyndham Australia Stake of the church, and there is still just one ward in Geelong. It's probably a larger ward than it was then, as far as our attendance is concerned and our total membership, but there is still just one ward. We have a highly transient population. People these days people move to Geelong for the university education there at Deakin University. They come for their few years while they do their degree, and then they graduate and move on. A few people move in and stay. So the overall size of the ward has grown a little bit, but very little. And I clearly remember that after I was baptised on November the 11th, 1981, for 12 months, there was no convert baptism. So I don't know what that's saying. I don't know if I scared off everyone else who came to church or
You
or what
remember
happened.
you were the first baptism in a long time in Geelong, but you were very active in missionary work after you were baptized. You were very active, and it was very much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. So let's just go back to that fateful day in whatever it was, October, November 1981. It was probably right at the end of October. On that day, well, at that time, I'd just come back from working at Falls Creek. Falls Creek is one of the ski resorts in Victoria, Australia, and I'd worked up there for the winter, Southern Hemisphere winter, so I finished at the end of September, and I'd come down to Geelong to come back to my mother's place. I've been living in Queensland for a few years, and travelling backwards and forwards between Queensland and Victoria, depending on surf and snow. And I worked for that season at Falls Creek, finished there, came back down to Geelong, and I was at a little bit of a loose end in that I'd come to Geelong. I was staying at my mum's place. I didn't have a job for a couple of weeks, and while I was home, there was one day I'd written a letter to a friend who was up in Queensland. This friend was actually an ex-girlfriend who was living in Queensland where I had lived. And so we'd been up there together, and we kept in touch. I'd come down to Victoria for a while. We kept in touch. I was putting a letter in the mail to her. I was walking down the road, and there were these two young fellows walking up the street on the opposite side of the road. And I saw you two walking up the street on the opposite side of the road, and I thought, they'll be well and truly gone by the time I'm home. I won't have to worry about those two. And I know, Joe, you said a number of times that you noticed me walking down the street.
I did. Do you want me to tell you what I thought?
Yes.
No, I had this distinct thought go through my head as I looked over. I saw you, and your hair was a little messed up. I don't know if you had just crawled out of bed and gone to mail that letter or not, but you did have hair back then. And I looked across the street and I looked at you and I thought, if anyone needs the gospel, he does. And it was interesting because I hadn't thought about seeing you beforehand when you finally answered the door, but it was kind of an interesting thing.
Okay.
And I remember, as I recall, I'm trying to remember back. I remember, I think you had a little, wasn't a Volkswagen probably, was it a bus? A little car with a surfboard or something on the top of it when we came up in the driveway, sitting there. I remember that. Yeah,
that was highly likely. The surfboard lived in the back of the car, on the roof of the car or whatever, because if I wasn't snow skiing, I was surfing. That's right. That's right. How had your day gone up to that point?
Well, if that was a normal day, probably not well.
I don't think it was in the morning. I don't think we had got in to teach anyone yet.
No, I don't think we had either.
That would have been unusual.
I clearly remember I was in the kitchen. I think I was preparing something to eat. And so I posted the letter. I'd gone back home. And I didn't see you two. As I walked back up to my home up the top end of the street, I didn't see you two. I don't know where you were.
We went into
Anyway,
stealth mode. We had to do
right.
that to sneak up on people, you know.
Anyway, I hear this rat-a-tat-tat on the door, and I suddenly thought to myself, who is that? I bet it's those two Mormon missionaries, or whatever you were, because I sort of had some vague notion about who or what you were, but I wasn't really too sure. And so, there's a knock on the door. Well, you've got to go and answer it, haven't you? You don't have any choice. You have to go and answer the door. So I knock on the door, and there are you two standing there. White shirts, ties, short hair, name tags, and Joe, from what I remember, I don't think you did much talking at that time.
Probably
I think Van did all the talking.
I don't remember whose door it was. It probably was Van's.
Oh,
yeah, we traded off
alternate
doors.
doors?
Yeah, we would trade off. Yeah.
And we still have short hair.
Yeah, look. Much shorter.
So I remember opening the door, and I still remember the three questions you asked. So I think you introduced yourselves, and I think you asked me if you could ask these three questions. Now, these three questions were like gold. I've told the missionaries up here, those three questions. You asked me, number one, did I believe in God? And I said, yes. Now, the reason I said yes at that stage was because I had recently, when I was working up at Falls Creek, I'd had an accident up there and I'd hurt my knee. I wasn't paying attention. I was working on a chairlift up there. I wasn't paying attention. I got hit by a chair in the side of the knee. And this was back in the days when chairs on chairlifts were made of 3-inch water pipe. They were heavy. And this thing hit me. I wasn't paying attention. It hit me as I was walking across the platform, dragged me under and around the bull wheel at the bottom of the chairlift. So this thing hit me in the knee, and I sort of, in a state of shock, I got to my feet, tripped the automatic thing that stopped the chairlift, and I sort of, in a state of shock, got up and sort of hobbled around, and they gave me the rest of the day off and said, go and have a rest. Now, the following day, I was having some visitors from Queensland come down, and I was going to go skiing with them. And more than anything at that time, I wanted to go skiing with my friends who had come down from Queensland, and I didn't know how I was going to be well enough to ski. And previous to this occasion, I'd read this book. This book was it was a religious sort of book. It was a conspiracy theory sort of book written by a guy called Stan Deyo, an American-Australian, called The Cosmic Conspiracy. And reading that book, it sort of convinced me the fact that God probably actually did exist. And not only that Jesus Christ was some relative of God the Father. And I really didn't understand much about that. But for that reason, because I'd had my prayer answered, because I prayed, and the next morning I got up and I was walking around normal. I went skiing with my mates. It was a miracle. God answered my prayer. He got to me at my moment of weakness, if you like. But I truly felt it was a miracle that I was able to go and pray, and my knee was suddenly better. So when you asked me that first question, I thought, yes, I do believe in God because he answered my prayer. And then you asked me if I believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. And I'd been raised in the Presbyterian Church. I hadn't been for many, many years. I was a rebellious surfing, snow skiing, and doing other things that I really shouldn't have been doing, but nothing wrong with the surfing and snow skiing, but all the other things that went along with it weren't too good. And for some reason, I think my childhood memory and plus this book sort of came back to me, and I said, yes, I do believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And the third question was, if you, and I'm not quite sure of the exact wording, but it was something like, if you found out, or if you could learn that Jesus Christ had restored his true church to the earth today, would you want to know about it? And having said yes, having answered yes to those first two questions, I felt that I would be pretty stupid if I said no to the third question. So there were three very good questions. Was that part of the standard missionary approach at that time?
I don't think so. We were still doing the blessing door approach, weren't we, Van?
That's what I was thinking. So I'm sitting here scratching my head going, wow, I don't remember asking those, but
it would have been Van asking those questions because I'm not creative enough to come up with those questions. So
yeah, typically when we would knock on a door, we would ask if you wanted a blessing on your home.
I'm glad you didn't ask me that, because I would have said, no, I don't think so, thanks very much.
Well,
yeah, you didn't want us to come in, I don't think, because your mom was home, right? And
No, my mother wasn't at home. She was at work. When I said yes to the third question, would I want to learn about more, Van, you probably said something like, well, we have a message for you. Can we come inside and share it with you? And I said, no, you're a total stranger to me. You're not coming inside. You can share it with me here on the door. So you opened up the flip chart.
You did.
And you started going through the first discussion, which back in those days was, this is back in the days of the rainbow discussions, for those who are listening who are old enough to remember the rainbow discussions. So you shared with me the first discussion at the time, which was telling the story about Joseph Smith, young Joseph Smith, the Book of Mormon, of course. And I do remember you getting to a page there showing me, the current prophet at the time, and his counsellors, and the first presidency and the council of the 12 apostles, and I was impressed with that. I was impressed with that mainly because I actually came home to Geelong from Falls Creek, and I had this thought in my mind that I wanted to join a church somewhere, and I wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure what church I should join. I did have something in my mind about the Catholic Church, and for some reason, and I had very little knowledge of anything religious at that time, but for some reason I had this feeling in my mind that the Catholic Church claimed to have some sort of authority, and to me that was important, and I had this feeling that I should join a church with authority, and the Catholic Church could have been it. But then I thought, no, I don't think it's a Catholic Church. So, seeing the picture of the first presidency of the 12 apostles, that sort of, I think, raised in my mind that question of authority, and probably reinforced the fact that you guys were claiming that Joseph Smith was a prophet who the Lord had restored the gospel to. So you gave me a Book of Mormon. You suggested I read some parts of it, and you also suggested I read what we now call Moroni's Promise, and what was called back then Moroni's Promise, Moroni chapter 10, verses 3 to 5. So being the obedient young man that I was, sort of weird, I went inside and read it, and I think I actually went and read it from the start. I don't think I read the part that you recommended I read. I thought, if I'm going to read a book, I'll read it from the start. So
I think that's true, Murray. I think when we finally caught up with you again, I was shocked at how far you had read, and you had just started from the beginning and read. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't really remember how far I'd gone, but anyway, I read some part of, I probably just read a page or two of First Nephi. I probably read the most commonly read pages in the Book of Mormon that everyone knows about.
If I remember right, you were well into First Nephi.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might have got stuck at the Isaiah chapters, perhaps, where everyone gets stuck.
All do, yeah.
So I think I prayed about it straight away. And
Yeah.
and so because I'd had the answer to that prayer in the ski fields, and my knee had been miraculously healed, I fully expected to get an answer to my prayer. But I must admit, I was a little bit scared because of what you told me about what had happened to Joseph Smith. Right? I wasn't really too sure what form an answer to a prayer might take. And I do remember though, that as I knelt and prayed, I felt this feeling and this voice coming into my mind saying, this book is true, follow these two young men and you'll be okay. That was the distinct feeling that I had. And so I now had this Book of Mormon. I had this feeling that it was true. And you two guys disappeared.
Yep, we did.
And possibly a couple of days after that, I got a job. And I started working out at Winchester, which is still working in Geelong. It's you Americans know about Winchester. It's a gun and ammunition manufacturer. My former girlfriend's father got me a job in the warehouse out at Winchester, and I was happily going along out to Winchester every day with this new job. What happened to you two guys?
Well, just within a very short period of time, it's probably a week or something after I'd first contacted you, I finished my mission. And so I came back to Idaho and left Joe with another companion.
Yeah, it's too bad Rodney Jones isn't here. Rodney came to Geelong as a senior companion to me. And, Murray, I think I've told you about this, but it was weeks. It was maybe 2-3 weeks. We would try to contact you. It got to the point where, we alternated planning the day, right? So it would be my day to plan, and Rodney's day to plan, but we would check back on people, especially people that we had at least taught or talked with, and we were getting to the point where Rodney was asking me, really, are we going to go by this house again? Nobody's there, right? And I was even getting to the point where, yeah, maybe it's time to just drop it and move on. And finally, one last time, we checked and you were there, and I remember that we got in. You let us in this time, and we were sitting in the room there in your house, and we taught you another discussion, and I think we challenged you to baptism. I remember being surprised that you had read as much as you had, and you actually said that you believed it was true, and I would just kind of, flabbergasted, because that just doesn't happen, really. Never happens, hardly. And we challenged you, and I think the challenge went something like, if you knew that this church was true, would you commit to be baptized? And you just flat out said yes. And then I think you said, I already know it's true, or something like that. I don't know if you remember.
And you and Rodney Jones both fell on the floor and passed out, and I had to administer. Yeah.
It was mind blowing.
Yeah, that just doesn't happen very often.
No, it was amazing though, and I think we were able to teach you regularly from that time forward, fairly regularly, and you went to church with us, I know, and met everybody at the ward there, and
Yeah. Well, the first time I went to church was the Sunday that I was baptized.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean,
we're kind of pushing the rules there.
I
But,
don't know what I was thinking,
yeah.
I remember you you and Elder Jones, Elder Hatch and Elder Jones, I remember you both coming, to those regular teaching appointments. And I'm not sure how we organised it because, I'd started work again and my mother was at work. And every time you taught me, we managed to do it at a time when my mum wasn't home.
Yeah.
There was one memorable discussion that we had where you invited me to go to the home of Cliff and Dawn Wade.
Oh, that's
Now,
what
I
it
don't
was.
know.
It wasn't Cowans. It was Wade's.
It was the
Was it
Wades.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Cliff and Dawn had 3 adopted children.
Yeah.
3 or 4. Hang on. Stephen, Douglas, and the daughter, who I keep in touch.
And she'll probably watch this too now.
She probably. That's okay. I can edit it out.
Wait, you're old. She'll forgive you.
Oh, I feel terribly embarrassed now. Margot, what was her name? Lisa. Lisa. So, my apologies, Lisa. You two won't believe this, but a few years ago, Lisa remarried. She had been married once earlier, and she had remarried. And we had kept in touch over the years. She had stopped attending church many years ago, but we kept in touch over the years. And her father, I'm trying to think, I think her father had passed away at this stage. And she asked me to be the father of the bride at her wedding. So I walked down the aisle with Lisa in my arm and gave her away at the wedding. So I do feel very embarrassed that I had a senior moment there at 65 years of age. I can be excused, I think, for doing that. But back on the subject, we went to their home. You taught the discussion. I was intrigued, I guess, with the Wade family, because this was the first Mormon family that I'd met. I said the M word again. Anyway, that was quite acceptable back then. This was the first Mormon family that I'd met, and it turned out that their daughter Lisa was being baptised on a Sunday in the very near future, and the Wade family very kindly offered to have me join in on that baptismal service and be baptised along with their daughter Lisa. Now, at the time, I had this notion in my mind that because you two were teaching, Joe, you and Rod were teaching me, and Lisa was being baptised, that there'd probably be a queue of people lined up at the font, all waiting to be baptised. So I was sort of slightly disappointed to learn of the fact that it was only Lisa and myself, Lisa, a little 8-year-old girl, being baptised by her dad, and Joe, you baptising me. So I was a little bit disappointed there. I don't know why you two, hadn't found more people to teach and baptise at that stage in Geelong. Yeah. But there you have it. That's how it went. So, in a nutshell, we tried to
get the crowds out, but they just wouldn't come. I sort of thought at some stage you might have hired out the local swimming pool to go and teach and baptise people down there. I just had this thought in my mind that because I think what I was thinking was that you two are out knocking on doors all day. People must be saying, yes, come on in and let's have a chat. Other people must be reading the Book of Mormon. Other people must be kneeling down and praying about it and finding out if it's true and getting an answer. And so therefore there must be crowds of people getting baptised, probably every month or something in Geelong. That wasn't the case. No.
And it wasn't the case anywhere in Melbourne. No. It wasn't the case anywhere in Australia. But I think the important fact is that it was the case on that day in Geelong, on the 11th of November of 1981, 2 people were baptised, one little 8-year-old girl and a 24-year-old surfing, snow skiing, layabout who wasn't going anywhere in life. So to say that this was a major point in my life where I experienced a great change, where, you know, as the scriptures say, I was born again. The natural man was put away, or at least temporarily, and you know, the spiritual man was reborn. I became adopted into the family of Christ. I became a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and for some amazing reason, ever since that day that I was baptised, I've probably missed church maybe on 3 or 4 occasions at the most over that time. And I'm going to take a guess that you two probably haven't missed many more days of church, or even maybe not as much as I have over that time. Why do you two keep on going? Let's go first. Van, you go first.
I have a testimony. I, like Joe, I have gained a testimony of the truthfulness, and not just the truthfulness of the gospel, but the blessings of the church and the organization of the church in my life. And attending and being part of that has blessed me throughout my life. And so I keep going. I know that it's the way that our Father in heaven would have us live. And I love it. It's just been a blessing in my life.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Van. Joe?
Yeah. So, you know, the thing that happened to me when I was 10 years old was I was a kind of a deep thinker. I spent a lot of time alone outside, and when I was 10 in this little farm town. But what really happened at that time when I was 10 years old was I had determined, and I guess in a way it was a revelation to me, that there was no other better way to live your life than to live according to the teachings of Jesus Christ. And that was literally something that was a gift that was given to me through revelation as a 10-year-old boy. And I have never wavered from that. It was that strong of an impression at that time. And what a blessing it's been to me. And I've lived it, and it's been strengthened. So, yeah. Sounds like Mario's trying to get you to go.
No, I've got one of the neighbours knocked on my door. Elaine, I'll come down and talk to you in a little while. I'll have to edit this bit out. No, I might not. But we're living in a block of units here in Cairns, and we have 3 neighbours, and you know we all talk to each other on occasion and knock on each other's door and see how we're doing and talk about what might be going on in the units here as far as maintenance and things like that are concerned. The church rents this unit that we're in, and the other, the unit next door to us is also rented by tenants, but the other 2 units are owner occupied. And so we're in a very nice little place, so it's great to have great neighbours. So just before we sign off, can you two, and we'll start with Van again, give us a little bit of a summary about where you are in life now, marital status, number of children, number of grandchildren, what you're doing for a living, you know, maybe what you're doing in the church at the moment.
Yeah.
Some sort of, you know, relatively brief summary like that for us, eh?
So I came home from my mission. I started at school, got married. I went to school in biology, entomology actually. So I studied insects. And after after I got my PhD, I started working at then Ricks College, which is now BYU, Idaho, teaching. I'm now an administrator. I'm an associate academic vice president there. Love being at BYU, Idaho, and love being in the classroom when they let me in the classroom. But I'm married. I have 4 children, 3 boys and a girl, and 7 grandchildren. My 7th grandchild was born in January. So 4 girls and 3 boys, grandchildren, and they're scattered all over. And and currently in the church, I'm serving on a high council in a young adult stake here at BYU, Idaho. And my wife is the Stake Relief Society president in that same stake. So.
Okay, fantastic. So you get to go to the same meetings together, which is great.
It is.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Van. Joe, look, I might just say for anyone who's really interested, if you Google Van Chrisman at BYU, you'll find a little bit out about his academic career and things like that. I did a little bit of snooping there, and it's pretty impressive. Joe flies under the radar a little bit as an engineer at Intel. You're not allowed to tell us what you do, are you?
Well, I work for a contractor that actually builds semiconductor fabs for different clients around the world. But I wanted to say something about Van before I forget. One of the things that was most impressive about Van, you could read a verse from the Book of Mormon. And remember, this is a 21-year-old. And I tested him on it a few times while we were together. You could read a verse from the Book of Mormon, and odds were that Van could tell you book and chapter and maybe even the verse of where that was. As a 21-year-old, it was pretty impressive, and I remember that about Van.
Wow. Can you still do that, Van?
Probably not quite as well, but I try.
He was pretty good. It was amazing.
That's pretty impressive. Joe, tell us a little bit more about your life.
So I actually got caught in that 18-month mission thing. So they ended up sending me home 6 months early, which I was a little upset about. But I got over it finally. I went to school at Arizona State University, graduated from there eventually. It took me a long time. By the time I graduated, I had a wife and 3 kids.
Wow.
But finally made it through there. Actually went into the construction field for a while. But then finally I ended up joining this firm that builds these semiconductor fabs all over the world for different clients. I've been traveling a lot of lately, mostly here in the United States. So, and I was in Boise last week, so we're having some fun in Boise with that client up there. But now I have 3 girls. They're all married, of course. The oldest one's getting close to 40 years old now. She has 6 kids. Then the middle one has 4 boys, and then the youngest has 4 kids. Total 14 grandkids, 10 boys and 4 girls. Wow.
And church-wise, I know you've been a bishop. What are you doing at the moment?
I served as a bishop, and my wife and I served in the young single adult ward for about almost 7 years. And then recently they kicked us out and sent us back to our home ward. We're still in mourning, but I'm the Elders Quorum Service Coordinator now in that ward.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
We loved our time with young single adults.
And you went back to your home ward, and they all said, "Who are you?"
They did.
Yeah, I do.
Amazing, because we had barely moved into this stake when we got called into the young single adult stake, and and so nobody knew who we were except the bishop. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, look, there's probably a lot more we could talk about, but it's almost an hour that we've been going, and I don't want to bore everyone to death. Yeah. But look, it's been fantastic catching up with both of you together, because I think we we actually did talk at one stage together on the phone, didn't we? A couple of years ago, I think, when Van first got back in touch with you and got back in touch with me. I think we might have had a little group chat there very briefly. So this might be the first or second time in 42 years that we've all spoken together, and certainly spoken at this length. So it has been fantastic. Excuse me, I do want to say to both of you, thank you. Thank you for your service as young 19, 20-year-old missionaries in Melbourne at that time, back in the early 1980s, because becoming a member of the church changed my life. Just in so many ways. I mean, it would, I could talk for an hour about, the way that it's changed my life from where I was going, which was going nowhere, to where I've ended up now serving another mission myself. I'll just briefly say this, that after 18 months as being a member of the church back in the early 80s, I went off and served a mission myself. I was called to the New Zealand Christchurch mission. That, was a life-changing experience and in many ways educated me for the rest of my life. And now, I'm serving a mission again. There have been people that have come into the church as a result of you two. As a result of you two knocking on my door, there have been many people coming to the church. There have been many of children of those people who have served missions. There's been my own daughter Miriam, who has served as a missionary in the Sydney North Mission. The impact, and there are even children. Yeah, so there are children of people. There are siblings of other people who have joined the church. If we drew a chart of how many people who have been affected by the simple fact that you two knocked on my door, and despite the fact that Van flew home, Joe and Rod were persistent enough, but particularly Joe, because Rod had no idea who I was. But particularly Joe, you were persistent enough to come and keep on knocking on my door until you got me at home again. And if you hadn't have done that, nothing would have happened. So, it has been an amazing, life-changing experience, not just for me, but for probably dozens of people, I suppose. I couldn't count them all. I could if I actually sat down and really mapped it all out. So, to any young missionaries who might be watching this, you don't know what impact you might have on those doors that you knock on, or those people that you approach in the street, or maybe even those less active members whose door you knock on, and they, through your example and through your teaching, decide to come back to the church. You do not know what effect you might have. It can just, and it will go on for generations, forever, I hope. I don't know. And then you count what happens on the other side of the veil, of course, because, I've done a little bit of family history work. We've done a little bit of temple work, and so have all those people who have come into the church since me. So thank you again for your incredible service, and not just your incredible service as missionaries, but since you've gone home and your kids have served as missionaries and brought people into the church, and you've served in the church and you've affected people and changed people's lives, continually. It goes on, and one day you two will catch up with me, and you'll get to serve another mission yourselves, and maybe you might have the good fortune to come back to the Australian Melbourne mission. What do you think?
I'd love it.
It would be a dream.
I'd love it.
I would love to.
So let's see what happens. It's just been, so good to catch up with you both today. And for those who are still watching, this video will be saved on as a post on Instagram. There will be some very slight editing done. It will be then uploaded to YouTube, Facebook, and as a podcast. So if you really want to bore yourselves to death, you can listen to us blabber on about the old days as you're driving to and from work, or whatever sort of commuting you do, or whatever you do. Please like, comment, and subscribe, follow on whatever platform you happen to be listening on. Appreciate those people who have joined us today, and it looks like there's still a few people live. So it looks like the people who have joined us live have stayed with us for some reason. Just fantastic to have you all here. Good night to those of you in the US and other northern people in those time zones, and happy lunchtime. It's lunchtime here in Australia. It's been great to have you all with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Murray.
Off from there.
Thank you,
Okay.
Joe.
Thank you all.
Murray.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
If you have an interesting story to tell, please contact us via our Instagram page or send an email to gatherin@proton.me.